I am Penelope, author of epic fantasy and paranormal romance, and welcome to my imaginary friends, a look behind the scenes of an author mapping the worlds in my head and making them a reality. Hello friends, today is Friday, August 21st, 2020, and this is episode 82 of My Imaginary Friends. I'm Leslie. So this week's best thing is that I am in a magazine. Women's World magazine apparently has a book club, and they have a feature called This Week's Best New Books, and they picked Crive, Metal and Bone to be one of them. So there is, my headshot is in the magazine, and the book cover, and a little blurb, and I got to go to the CVS and pick up a copy. So it's the August 24th issue of the magazine, if anyone is interested in seeing it. And it's funny because whatever other things that happen in the book world, like most of my family, especially my older family members, they don't know anything about Publishers Weekly or Book List or what a starred review is and things like that. But people know magazines, and if they can go somewhere and buy a magazine and your face is in it, that's kind of a big deal. And I don't know, I thought it was very cool and very unexpected. So yeah, that was kind of a highlight. So, writing update. Yes, things are still going well. There's ups and downs. So last weekend, let's see, I mentioned beforehand at some point in a previous episode that I'm taking Saturdays off. Last weekend, I actually took Saturday and Sunday off. That was not in the plan, but I was feeling a little crispy around the edges, and I just needed a recovery day. And I felt like it was like after you work out a lot. Like if you work out a lot, you need recovery days. And they say that if you're trying to actually build muscle development happens on recovery days, not necessarily in the gym. It's like you can work out 7 days a week, and that's probably very bad for you. I personally like to work out one day and then take the next day off. And then if I am up to it, I'll work out the next day. Although that doesn't actually really happen very often. Usually it's like work out one day, take 2 or 3 recovery days. But that's not the ideal. But yeah, so for writing, I needed some recovery days, and I took the weekend off. Fortunately, I was able to catch up because of some of the scenes that I was working on in book 4. The scenes that I was revising, they didn't really need any work. I just was reading through them to make sure. There were like 5 or 6 scenes in a row that I was like, oh, I could just move through these really quickly. And then I got to the hard scene again. So I caught up during the week. By the end of the week now, I'm behind again, but that's the ebb and flow of the schedule. Like you can't do it perfectly. So I knew that was going to be the case. And I planned some extra time for this scene that I'm working on today because I knew it was going to be hard. That's also why I do my schedule a little bit front loaded. So I leave like a whole extra week on the back end for the unexpected, for if I had to take extra days off and things took longer than I thought they were going to. There's anything can happen. I could get sick, someone else could get sick. So even when I do the schedule, I always make sure that it's very well padded. I still try to meet it, so I'll have the extra padding on the end. I act like it's rigid, but I always know that it's not. Also, I finally have been able to get some real work done on the novella, book 3.5, which is called Echoes of Ash and Tears. And it's the one that's going to appear in the anthology later this year. For the past couple of weeks, I've been like, I need to do 2 writing sessions. But since the deadline for book 4 is before the deadline for book 3.5, that's been my priority. However, if I have to turn in a finished version on October 1st, my copy editor is going to I'm going to allot 2 weeks for the copy editor. So I really actually have to finish these books at the same time. And so finally, I was just like, okay, this is ridiculous. I know that there's work to be done, so I have to follow my own advice and do it first. So I start in the mornings these days. I'm working on the novella first for the first hour and a half, and then move into book 4. And that's been working really well. Yeah, it's like if there's something that you have to do it first. And I know that both of these deadlines are important, but I was mentally prioritizing the novel because it's longer and I need more space with it, and it's harder, I think. Although the novella is not a walk in the park. So I know that I'm going to get it done if I do it second. But I know that I wasn't getting the novella done trying to do that second. So move up to first. Priorities. Adjust your priorities and move things around if you need to. So yeah, that has been working. So the process for this revision, I reread the entire novella, story gridded it out by hand. Then I reviewed the character worksheets that I already had and tried to define the characters a little bit more. So I just had a fast draft, and so the character sketches were pretty broad brush strokes because I don't really know the characters that well until I finished my first draft. So I just reviewed everything and tried to fill in some of the gaps in terms of the character traits, like what are they like, their motivations, what do they want, why can't they have it, their wound, the lie, and their fear. And then I went through, and this is when I opened up onestopforwriters.com, which is a great resource, and I go to it periodically throughout whatever the process is. So this time, I used their scene map, I think the informal scene map. And so they have all of these, there's so much stuff on that site, but part of it is, I guess you can call them worksheets. Anyway, it's basically just an outlining tool. And I used that to do a very high level outline based on the changes that I knew I wanted to make. So I kind of had to brain dump them, but I wanted to brain dump them inside the structure of, a properly structured story. And then the next step was to flesh out the outline. And I'm doing that on index cards this time. It was interesting. Last night I had the event at Mysterious Galaxy, and I'll put the link, the replay in the show notes. And it was with Kay Arsenal Rivera, who was fantastic. And super grateful to her for doing that with me. And she had mentioned something, she put it in a way that I hadn't heard before. It was like, you never really learn how to write a book. You learn how to write the book that you're writing. Because we were talking about process and craft a lot. And yeah, like the process shifts and changes for each book, which I talk about all the time. But it's always good to remember that, I know how to do this, but I'm going to rediscover it with every new project because it's going to be slightly different, because the project is going to require it, and because I'm different somehow every day and with every project. So I pull out different tools, when I need them. So yes, I was working on the high level outline, and so I'm now in the process of taking all of those points from the outline and designing the scenes. And what I'm doing this time, which is actually kind of new, so I have one index card per scene, and I'm using my basic story grid structure, my modified story grid structure. And then after I write the card, which is just the overview, I flesh it out in the synopsis. So I do a paragraph per card in a synopsis. So I can capture some of the details that didn't go on the card that I already am thinking about, like their emotional state, what's going on in their mind as they're doing these things. So the index card is just the desire, inciting incident, progressive complications, turning point, crisis, climax, and resolution. And then I sort of do a summary in paragraph form in the synopsis. And then when I get to the writing, I will use that paragraph and then just build that out into the scene. That is the plan now. So I've got 11 note cards. I think there's going to be somewhere between 18 and 20 scenes or / chapters in the novella. So over halfway done, most likely. I was hoping to be done by today and start writing today, but it's taken a while to get the scenes together, to get them fleshed out. Because a lot of times I'm sketching them out in my notebook first, figuring out all of those points, then writing them down on the index card, then typing up the synopsis. And I feel like it's a good process because it's really allowing me to think through it the way I would when I write it. So sort of sink into those characters as I write the synopsis. And it's still high level, like there's still details that I don't know yet. But I think it will make the writing a little bit faster because normally I do this kind of detailed work right before I write the scene. So I'll have the index card, but I won't go through the extra step of fleshing it out in the synopsis. I do work with synopses a lot, but they come at different points in the process. So sometimes it'll just be my brain dump. My initial brain dump will be the synopsis that I'm working for, or I will refine it into the structure, but I haven't done it where I've actually charted out the scene and then done the synopsis and then written it. And I like it so far. I really like how it's working. It allows me to hopefully, this is the goal, like pre-visualize any problems that I'm having. So I'll know that the scene is kind of sound, structurally sound. And also it's getting through the emotions, the stuff that isn't captured on the note card, which is a lot. Also, like with any other skill, repeating things over and over helps a lot. So I feel like within the past 2 months, I've written the bonus epilogue, which I kind of had to conceive from scratch, and then working on book 4, working on book 3.5, revising those things, kind of being in the same stage of the process with both of them, which is not my favorite thing with 2 projects, but that repetition of revision, review what I have, revise it, fix it is, and that repetition in a short period of time is really driving it home. And I think it's ultimately helpful in the process, at least for these books. I guess we'll see if it ends up helping me long term. I also struggle with seeing turning points. And there is an article that I found a couple of years ago that I print out and I keep in my reference folder. So I have a folder right next to me that is full of just reference worksheets. And it's from an author named Lee Allen Howard, and I got it off of his website. I will link to it if you're interested, because I look at this all the time because I understand that a scene should turn. Some people call it a twist. Some people call it a disaster. There's different terminology for it, but something, should change. And in StoryGrid, or at least on my index card, my master cheat sheet index card that I use to build all the other index cards, I have written turning point equals new information. Something new happens in the scene and it comes after the complication. So things have already, the scene has a goal. The character, the POV character of the scene starts the scene with some kind of desire or goal, and then they encounter obstacles to it, and then something changes. New information happens, the twist, the disaster, and then it causes a crisis, which is a choice that they have to make, the best bad choice or irreconcilable goods in StoryGrid terminology. But that turn, having something change in the scene, often stymies me. And so I go back to this article just to refresh myself on what that means. And so the idea of the turn and the turning point, I don't know if it's originally from Robert McKee in his book Story, but people give him credit for it. And he says every scene must turn. And that makes sense to me because I think something has to change in every scene, or else it's just exposition and it's not a good scene. So a couple of times this week, it's been me trying to figure out how to fix a scene that isn't working for some reason. Initially, I always want to cut it. Okay, the scene's not working. We don't need it. Cut it out. And then I'll be like, wait, do I need it? What is the scene doing? Oh no, I do need it because it's establishing, it's an important step in the character arc. It's important information. It's doing something that I need to be done. So how can I make the scene work? So once I know the purpose it serves, I can rebuild it and focus on the turn, because a lot of times the turn is the problem. When I'm kind of evaluating the scene, once I figure out what it's supposed to do, then I have to figure out what's at stake for the character. The stakes for the character, I think it's similar to the value at stake, and that's StoryGrid terminology. And so I'm always trying to find the commonalities between what different people are saying about story, because I think they're always kind of saying the same thing. So what's at stake can be, in this article it says love, truth, safety, honor, justice, meaningfulness. And that goes, the goal is to support what's at stake for that character. And so then it says deliver the unexpected. And he quotes Robert McKee, who said, the effect is to crack open the gap between expectation and result, turning the character's outer fortunes, inner life, or both from the positive to the negative or the negative to the positive in terms of values the audience understands are at risk. So yeah, the turn is to turn the polarity of the scene, which means turning the status of the things that are at stake within the scene. And it says the effects of turning points include surprise, increased curiosity, insight, and a new direction. New information and a new goal for the next scene. So that is something that I always need to be reminded of. I've done this a couple of times this very week where, gone through these steps, realized I wasn't sure what was at stake. I hadn't clarified that in my mind. And then I had to sort of use the conflict to change the polarity, to change the value from negative to positive or positive to negative. And I ended up at the end, starting with a scene that I thought maybe I'll just cut it out completely, and that's always laziness, ending up with a scene that is really good, that I think is really good. And that really works better because I broke it down to its constituent parts and then rebuilt it up again, and rebuilt it stronger. I don't know why I can't remember it. I do have a very bad memory, but I just go back to the sheet over and over again. Like there's certain things I have to go back to again and again. And maybe one day they will be intrinsic. But today is not that day. In other news, I had been really excited about Lovecraft Country on HBO. Because a couple of years ago, I think I mentioned that I'd helped my brother audition for that. And so I read the script of the pilot and I really, really liked it. I was excited for the first episode and I watched it and I was not excited anymore. I really wasn't feeling the first episode and I'm not sure why. I tried to ask Paul, did they change the script or did it just not translate from what I read to the screen? The tone was very strange to me. There were a lot of tones. I think the show, that first episode at least, had a tone problem. I didn't like the way it was directed. I thought it looked ugly in a lot of places, just visually. The shots that were chosen. I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna give it a couple more episodes and see if they find their footing. A lot of other people liked it, so it could be a me thing. But I had been really looking forward to it, and I had told a bunch of people, yeah, this is such a great script. And I mean, I don't have it anymore, so I can't compare. Some of the things I remember being the same, and some of the things, I don't know if they changed it or if I remembered it wrong, or it could just be the translation. Like it could be the direction, that since I had a problem with the direction, because it wasn't necessarily the acting or the effects or anything like that. Something about it just wasn't working for me. Like I said, could be a me thing. I will see if it improves. Something that I can recommend wholeheartedly is Deal with the Devil by Kit Rocha, which is the new Mercenary Librarians book. That is not actually the title of the series, I don't think, but that's what everyone has been calling it. I read that in like a day and I just gobbled it up. I loved it. I really like Kit Rocha's writing. I read much of their Beyond series. I'm not good at keeping up with series past book like 8 or 9 maybe. So, once it extends beyond that, I fizzle out. But I'm really excited for the next book in this series. They've set up, kind of the couples that are going to get their own books. You have a very good idea about who they're going to be, and you get to know them in the first book. And it's basically a dystopian future. It's the same world as their Beyond series, if you're familiar with them, but a different part of the world. And it's a road trip. It's super soldiers and, people like super powered people with great stakes and good action. So yeah, I like that one a lot. Oh, and my desktop whiteboard finally came. It's from a company called Fluid Stance, and they actually make, their main product has been this balancing board for people with standing desks. I have this special mat. It's for when I'm standing up, and it makes it so that you change positions a lot, because you shouldn't just stand, you should be kind of always moving when at a standing desk. Anyway, I love this thing. So I'll put a picture in the show notes, or I'll link to it so you can see what it looks like, because it's metal, it's a whiteboard, it's also magnetic. I've been sticking my note cards on it, especially my reference note cards. And then I'll slide my keyboard under it. It fits perfectly. So then I have desk space to work to write, and I can still have things here. I can clip other papers to it. And it just is regular whiteboard. So all of my whiteboard markers work. And it's lovely. I've really been enjoying having it here. It does help keep my desk a little neater. And it does help me not use so many sticky notes for just random notes. And yes, it is kind of expensive for what it is, but it's sturdy, and I'm enjoying it a lot. So, also, the anthology news. I did want to update everyone. So Grace Draven, unfortunately, has had to bow out of the anthology that we're doing. We did find another person to take her place. So Kelly Armstrong will be in the anthology now. I'm not familiar with her work, but I've heard of her, and she's very prolific. She has a lot of books to her name. She's done a lot. So it's really exciting that she'll be able to, on such short notice, contribute a novella to the anthology. So Under a Winter Sky should be out November 19th. That is the date that we are targeting. We will hopefully have a cover sometime next month and do a cover reveal at some point, and there might even be arcs. So stay tuned for more on that. Like I said, Echoes of Ash and Tears, book 3.5, is going to be in the anthology. And I don't want to say too much about it now since I'm still working on it. That fast draft, I'll be able to use a few words from the first draft, but mostly not. Oh, we have a visitor. Sterling has come to say hello, if you're on the video. This is Sterling. So I don't want to talk too much about it, but I will tell you that book 4, Requiem of Silence, the couple that has the new love story is Zelly and Varden. I'd gotten a question from Library Addict actually last night at the event, and I think we had to wrap up before I got a chance to answer. So that is super fun. So the main POV characters for book 4 are Kiara, Jasminda, Zelly, and Varden, plus a bonus POV that I'm not going to tell you about. You'll also get cameo POVs, I want to say. I was trying to explain this at the event last night. There's so many characters that I love, that I know a lot of other people love. I think Library Addict asked about Zango from book 2. At one point, I was going to do a novella for Zango. I truly was. The problem is that, this novella for this anthology needs to be a standalone. And so if it's the first Earthsinger Chronicles entry you've read, it shouldn't spoil things. That's why it's 500 years in the past. And I don't think it's going to spoil anything really. You'll meet some characters that you meet later. But for me to do a novella with Zango, it would have to be after Whispers of Shadow and Flame. And then it would spoil the stuff that happens in Song and Whispers to a certain degree, small spoilers. So that's kind of ultimately why I didn't do his story for this anthology. Because at one point I thought about it. I was like, oh, what I'm doing is hard and I want to do something else. But it was always, book 3.5 Echoes was always what it is. And that's just kind of what it had to be. As much as I plot and plan, I also listen to the characters, and more so than listen to the characters, listen to the story. And I've had ideas about the way the story progresses for many, many years. And so I'm trying to honor that. So there's a possibility of more, spin-offs in the future after I've had some time away from it. Because I do have characters I think The Adventures of Clove and Vanessa would be amazing. I think Zango, I think Farron. There's characters who, I want to know what happened to Devana. She's not in book 4. What was her life? There's a story there. That's part of the problem with having all of these secondary characters that I try to make as three-dimensional as possible, and then I want to tell their stories. So, who knows what the future will hold. Once I'm able to get some space and time away from Earthsinger Chronicles, I might revisit them in some form in the future. So yeah, that was my update. And we are long, so I will wrap up and wish you a wonderful week. Sterling's being very, very cattish. He's being very cuddly, which is not his normal disposition. I think he knows he's going to the vet later today. Get his shots. So I will talk to you next week. For episode show notes and to sign up for the Footnotes newsletter, go to myimaginaryfriendsshow.com. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and watch the video episodes on YouTube. I would really appreciate a rating or a review to help support the show. And My Imaginary Friends is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. For more fantastic podcasts, go to frolic.media/podcasts.